and shout because I'm conscious that the sound's kind of disappearing, so please wave at me if you can't hear me. Okay, so yeah, I guess I don't think of myself as an acoustician, shall we say. So maybe my background is a little bit different to some of the people in this room. And I've worked with many people who studied acoustics, and yeah, so I always kind of feel like I don't really know anything about acoustics, but somehow I do work in it. Okay, so I'm going to start with this very boring map of where I've been working in my career, which unfortunately only includes the UK. Normally people have this lovely world map of places. So I started off by doing a degree in at the University of Bristol in physics with astrophysics. So we'll talk more about the details of this. I then worked in Bristol still in a hospital as a medical physicist before going on to do a PhD at the University of Exeter, then moving to the National Physical Laboratory just outside London, and then to UCL. So I've worked in some kind of different environments, so I'll sort of step through, I guess, how I went from that physics degree to working in medical ultrasound at UCL. But first, I thought I'd just tell you a bit more about myself and what I do and who I work with at the moment, in case you don't know much about me. So this is the group that I work with. So I work in the Biomedical ultrasound group at UCL in the Department of Medical Physics and Biomedical Engineering. So there's 3 of us who is principal investigators in this group, and then we're kind of a mixture of engineers, physicists, mathematicians, and various other backgrounds. So this is a moment, and we do quite a big range of work, all using acoustics, from modelling of ultrasound propagation and software for doing that, to image reconstruction, photoacoustic imaging, sort of different ways of solving the wave equation using machine learning and things like that. And then in the middle is kind of my area, which is measuring acoustic fields, designing, characterizing ultrasound hardware, and then some of the applications that we work on the right, which are at the moment ultrasonic, neuromodulation, and rewarming of frozen tissues using ultrasound. So yeah, these are kind of my bits and the people that I work with mostly here. So I guess I'll kind of talk a bit about the sort of work that I've done and how that's evolved over the years through my career. But I guess, yeah, this is not a science talk, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just to give you a bit of background. Okay, so how did I get into acoustics then? So I started off doing a degree in physics with astrophysics. So I did actually do a project once where I had to take pictures of stars and then measure the brightness of them from these kind of pictures, which was quite cool. But when I got to the end of that degree, I had a general training in physics, but I kind of realized I wanted to do something a little bit more applied, and yeah, that maybe had a more obvious application that I could see. So then I took this training post as a medical physicist for 2 years. And basically, this is a kind of scheme where you work in the hospital and you move around different areas and you learn all of the different applications of physics in medicine. So I spent some time working in radiotherapy, in diagnostic radiology, and then also in ultrasound. So this is kind of how I came to acoustics. And I guess the reason why I stuck with this one is because it was just the most fun. So the other ones involve ionizing radiation. So you don't really have a lot of access to the equipment. You can't just kind of play and do experiments. Whereas when I did my ultrasound placement, we spent a lot of time scanning each other. There was a basement full of old equipment that we were just let loose with. So old scanners that were kind of this size of the screen, about this big, and all sorts of old equipment. There was an old Schlieren system that we put back together and had a play with. And yeah, there's just much more kind of experimenting and freedom, I guess. So that's why I kind of enjoyed doing that. But then when I got to the end of this training scheme, I guess most of the jobs were in radiotherapy because they need a lot of people to make sure that the doses are correct and things like that. And I just thought, I don't want to do that. It doesn't sound like there'd be much kind of experimenting. So I was having a chat to my supervisor and he said, oh, I've actually got this PhD project, which we need someone to do. So then I ended up going to the University of Exeter and doing a PhD looking at the bioeffects of ultrasound. So I was looking at what the effects of ultrasound were on blood flow and blood vessels. So I did this and then thought, no way that I'm staying in academia. Don't really like this environment either. Seems a bit unstable. So then I ended up going to the National Physical Laboratory, where I worked for about 3 years. So I guess most of the work that I was doing here was learning all the basics of how to make measurements of ultrasound fields, doing calibrating of hydrophones and radiation force balances and characterizing ultrasound devices and things like that. But also doing some research, still a little bit on ultrasound bioeffects. And I guess some of the highlights of this time were, so these are all the things that I used. And I think this position gave me a really good grounding in all of these basic techniques and in doing things very, very precisely, because this is the business of the National Physical Laboratory. It's the UK's National Standards Institute. It holds standards for pressure, for example. So we're doing calibrations for people, and then these devices go off and then their measurements are traceable back to the National Physical Laboratory. So this was really good, but not so much freedom to do the kind of, any, just pick a research topic of something that I'm interested in and kind of go with it. But there were some really good things about this job as well. And one of them was this project that I worked on, which was, I think the EMRP stands for European Metrology Research Project. So basically it was a collaborative European project where we were trying to come up with dose quantities for ultrasound. So at the moment, kind of ultrasound dose, we don't have this sort of well-defined quantity like they do with radiation dose and things like that. So we were trying to work out for therapeutic applications, yeah, I guess how we might quantify that dose and measure it and things like that. But the best thing about this was meeting all of the other people on the project and kind of starting to build this network. My boss at the time was really good at introducing me to people at conferences, so that I could get to know researchers at other institutions. And then being on this project, actually, it was how I met the next boss, the next job. And that kind of, I guess it opened the door to that position when he was hiring. He'd already seen my work, so I think that really helped. So I left there in 2014 and moved to University College London, and was a postdoc working with Brad Treby, who at the time had just been awarded a fellowship, so he had some money to hire a postdoc. And a lot of my work was focused on measuring ultrasound fields still, but doing this for validation of the K-Wave Acoustics toolbox. So I don't know if people are familiar with it, but it's an open source acoustics toolbox. It's used by a lot of people. So I was trying to do some experiments to show or to find out how accurate it is basically against measurements. So this was really good because a lot of people know this toolbox. So it kind of, I guess it increased the profile of my work probably. So I was doing this kind of thing, characterizing sources, making measurements of acoustic fields after they've passed through different things, including human skulls, to see if we can model them accurately. And I guess this is still quite a big part of my work at the moment. So at this point, I guess I was trying to move from being a postdoc to, what do I want to do next? Do I want to get a permanent academic position? So what are the boxes that I need to tick in order to do that? So one of these things was being a research co-I on this particular grant. So I helped to write it, so some of the kind of measurement and characterization things. And then I had something to put on my CV that said my name is on this grant, and it's, this many £100,000. So that was a good tick in the box, and also started this huge new area of work for us, which was kind of just getting started. And I think this was another really kind of lucky thing that we got into this area kind of as it was becoming more and more popular. And then it was a small community, it was easy to get to know people, and I think that's really helped me build a network as well, working on this stuff. So the general idea is that we want to try to use ultrasound to modulate brain activity. And at the moment, people are doing this by just taking a single element transducer and just putting it on the back of someone's head and turning it on, and then measuring with EEG or something to see if there are any changes. And they do measure changes, but it turns out it's mostly because you can hear a noise when the ultrasound turns on. So it's potentially not always a real effect. So our idea was to try to build this device that has a lot more kind of engineering so that we could more precisely target regions of the brain, plan exactly where the sound is going, how much, what the amplitude is at that point, and then we can try and sort of find thresholds and all this kind of stuff. So that's what we've been working on. So then, yeah, another thing, so Trevor mentioned earlier about kind of getting involved in committees and having these things on your CV which look good, makes it looks like your work has impact. So because of I guess my work on the K-wave validation and previous connections that I'd made through my old job, I was invited to be part of the IEC Ultrasonics Technical Committee. So I'm on a couple of the working groups for focused ultrasound transducers and a kind of hydrophone calibration one. And at the moment, we're actually writing a new standard on kind of exactly what I do on measurement-based modelling. So what's the kind of standardised way of doing it and making sure that you're validating that you're doing it properly. So yeah, then I applied for an internal fellowship. So this was in the Centre for Surgical and Interventional Sciences at UCL. Yeah, this is like another stepping stone. I think all of these things have helped to build my CV towards this internal fellowship thing, which then kind of another network that I joined, and then I was awarded the UKRI Future Leaders Fellowship in 2020. But I guess, yeah, these are sort of the main stepping stones. So I'm conscious that I'm going to run out of time before I've said everything, so I'm trying to speed up. So my fellowship was, I think this is a really good thing. As Trevor said before, it's like you get or in this case, it's 7 years to devote to researching something that supposedly you can spend all your time on, and you can really kind of get into the details. But I guess the one perhaps downside of it is it feels like you have to write some kind of new and exciting thing and say, I'm going to start this new field, and I'm going to be the leader of it, and this is what I'm going to do now. So I came up with this idea with some help from other colleagues, to use ultrasound for a new application to rewarm frozen tissues that have been cryopreserved. So at the moment, there's a problem with you can freeze something, but when you rewarm it, if you don't do it fast enough, ice forms, you get thermal stresses, and you damage the tissue, so it can't be used. So this is kind of, I guess it's an obstacle to being able to freeze maybe whole organs, and then use them later for transplant. So people have had a go at using microwaves and nanoparticle warming for these things. So maybe we can also use ultrasound to literally heat it from the inside very quickly. So yeah, I think this is kind of, so we published the first paper on this now, showed that it does seem to work. You can heat the tissue when it's frozen. But yeah, I guess I'm very lucky to have been awarded this, and I'm very happy that it's obviously gives this huge boost to my career, but at the same time, it's this kind of very different application of acoustics, and I'm still kind of trying to juggle with this with all of the other work that I've still carried on neuromodulation and other things. So yeah, and then I guess, yeah, where I am now is last year I was promoted to Principal Research Fellow, which is equivalent to Associate Professor. If you're still on a research fellowship, that's what you get called at UCL. So yeah, so this is where I am, and I guess I also want to include some other things which didn't happen, because I feel often people give their career track without saying things that they didn't get, basically failures. So some challenges. This work that I started in 2014 when I moved to UCL, I guess we thought, this is going to take a couple of years and we'll just bang out a few papers and then, tick that box. But that's not really how it works. And I'm still doing this. And now my postdoc is actually taking over. So we have published quite a few papers on it and, changed things, but it's something that's been ongoing for years. And it's been a casualty of this whole period of my career, which was going from being a postdoc to an independent investigator, which, there's a lot of time spent writing fellowships and applications for things. which means that perhaps they're just doing science and publishing the papers just suffers a little bit, but this is the system. So I also applied for a University Research Fellowship from the Royal Society, which I did get an interview for, but then wasn't awarded. But I think that was probably a good thing, because it meant that I wrote this application. It was on the same thing that my FLF was awarded for. So I got all this feedback. I got reviewers' comments, I got feedback from internal people, and then I kind of worked on it some more, resubmitted it in a different format, and it was successful. So I don't think that was a waste of time at all. And many people that I know have applied for a lot of fellowships before getting one. At the same time as applying for this internal fellowship at UCL, they were also advertising lectureships. So I thought, great, this would be a really good way to get a permanent position. I'll apply for that. Maybe I'll just get to stay here as a lecturer. Didn't even get an interview, but I did get the internal fellowship. So I don't really know why still, but you know, every application is a good practice. So it's still worth doing, I think. Okay, so I think I've kind of explained this a bit, but I suppose, how did the opportunities that I've had lead to more opportunities? Like, how have I built my career on these things that I did? So I mentioned before that this project really helped me to build a network, and I'm still in touch with a lot of these people. I collaborate with them. You know, there's been further grant proposals, but they did ultimately kind of lead me to my next job, because you know, one of the other people on the project had a job opening. They also led me to kind of be invited to join this committee through the contacts that I made and the work that I was doing. And then this grant has kind of led on to, I guess it was a stepping stone to something I could put on my CV, but it was just something that kind of set us off in a new direction, and led to sort of joining more networks and things like that. So yeah, I think the other thing that I do a lot of is collaborate with people in different areas, which I think is much easier. Well, it's easy when you work in healthcare, that you have these different options of manufacturers of ultrasound equipment, clinicians. So I collaborate with some of the ultrasound manufacturers, or just, you know, work with them. Often when they make things, it's kind of a conversation, and then they end up improving their product. Or we've done characterisation of medical therapy equipment and things like that, so that the treatments that are done with these pieces of equipment can be improved and be more effective. We collaborate with medics and radiographers, lots of other academic collaborations which have kind of built over the years, more grant proposals, just, you know, writing papers. A lot of this is just chatting to people and getting to know them. And then these kind of technical committees and I guess organising stuff without putting too much of a burden on yourself. But yeah, these have been really important. I think other things that I've done that have also been really beneficial are kind of getting involved in loads of committees within the university. Sometimes it does feel a bit like it's a time sink, but it has kind of got me in front of some of the senior people. Like, I know the head of department quite well, because he's involved with all these committees. So you spend time every week, you know, in front of this person, and they get to know you. And then when you need a letter of support, then they know who you are and they can write a good one. Teaching is something that you have to do in academia, but again, I think, as Trevor said before, it's a really good way of making sure that you know your science when you have to explain it to someone else. And then I guess internal collaborations across disciplines as well, with other people inside the department, and that just I think it helps to, if you need to know something that you don't know how to do, you find out who knows how to do it, and then you go and work with them. And I think this is a good, you know, it helps you get practice in explaining your work to other people, and you can get that kind of extra knowledge that you don't have. So other things that have been really important, I think, having support. So from a range of different people, I guess supervisors, and our department has a mentoring scheme. So I've got like a professor who's my mentor. I'm part of a development network that's organised by the the Future Leaders Fellowship people, and some collaborators as well have become mentors. I also have some really good friends in the department, most of whom have moved on to other places now, but we've all been going through the same stage of our career. So we've read each other's applications, you know, we've told each other to go and apply for this thing when we weren't sure, and kind of, yeah, talk about maybe like how difficult it is to get through this sort of career stage. And I think, yeah, recently I've found that peer-to-peer mentoring has just been really helpful, kind of as a new PI, having other people that are sort of trying to get a group up and running at the same time has been really useful. Coaching, I've recently discovered, is amazing. So rather than having a mentor who says, this is my career, just do the same and then you'll get to this point, it's somebody who will, I guess, help you to solve your own problems and help you to work out how it's going to work for you and how you can use your skills to, you know, the best way. And then I kind of put this on here because I sort of feel like as an early, or am I still an early career researcher? I don't really know where that ends, but us kind of younger people, I think, have a responsibility to try to change the way that things are done. So to try to make the field more diverse, to sort of try to take this pressure off of like, we've just got to publish loads of papers and that's the only thing that matters. So I think this is by talking to your peers and just getting different things on your CV, like public engagement or committees or just EDI things, all of these things hopefully will just make a bit of a change, so that we can have more kind of diverse and maybe more comfortable careers. So my last thing is one of the questions that Simone suggested that we could answer is what advice or questions would I give myself? And I think I still need to listen to these things. But yeah, I think one of them is, when is a job a good opportunity and when is it not anymore? When is it time to move on? And for me, I think that's always, is there something still to learn? So one job that I had, I think I got to a point where I couldn't really diversify anymore. I'd learned kind of, you know, what there was to learn and I wasn't really progressing. So it was time to move. And then I think still while I've been at UCL, just because of all the different projects that I've been involved in, there's always something to learn. There's a huge learning curve. When I got there, I didn't really do any modelling and now it's a huge part of my job. What kind of work do you enjoy? So I guess what kind of environment do you enjoy working in and what kind of things do you like working on? So in my PhD and shortly afterwards, I did some work on ultrasound bioeffects. So I was trying to work with cells and things like that. And then I just realized I really don't like it. It's too uncertain. I didn't know enough about it. And then I think once I'd realized that, and then I went more towards kind of just doing more metrology and modeling and things like that. I like these things because they're precise. So I enjoy doing it and I'm interested in solving the problems. Don't compare yourself to other people. I think this is really difficult. I think in academia, when you're looking at other people's CVs and how long was somebody a postdoc before they got a fellowship or a lectureship, it's very easy to think, oh my God, I'm just doing this so slowly. But you know, everyone's career is different, so it's not a race. And I don't think there's any point in thinking that you're behind. But it's hard to remember that. Yeah, also don't say yes to everything. And I think I'm still trying to figure this out, but what do you gain from an opportunity and what's the benefit to you? If it's literally like someone is just getting you to do their admin, are you going to gain anything? Just say no. I think this happens a lot to women as well. Like, can you take notes? Can you organize this thing? So no. But if there is something where, you know, if you're going to be invited onto an organizing committee or a panel or something like that, if there's a benefit that you get to know someone or your face gets somewhere or the profile of your work is raised, then that is a good thing to do. But I think it's always worth thinking through what that is. Yeah, and I think after the last talk as well, I'd say that maybe I feel like now I should maybe have more fun with my work and think about different ways to, you know, to enjoy it and to maybe get out and share your enthusiasm. And that's it. Yeah.
Our next speaker is Jo. Most people probably know her either via